She said I didn't belong in the family, so I made her pay for it. I stood in the center of the perfectly manicured rose garden, the sun beating down on my neck. It was my engagement party, a day that was supposed to be filled with joy. Before we continues, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps this powerful, life-changing story reach the world. Instead, I felt like an intruder in my own celebration. My fiancé Liam was off getting drinks, leaving me alone with his mother, Eleanor. Eleanor was a woman carved from ice and old money. She wore pearls that cost more than my college tuition and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You look lovely, dear," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Although I must say that dress is a bit simple for a Vanderbilt affair. Did you find it on sale?" I smoothed the skirt of my dress, a vintage piece I had found at a thrift store, and altered myself. "I made it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My grandmother taught me to sew." Eleanor laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "How quaint. A seamstress in the family. Well, I suppose we all have our little hobbies. Just don't expect to be making your own wedding gown. We have standards to uphold." "Standards," I repeated, feeling a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. "Liam loves my dress. He says it's unique." Eleanor sighed, sipping her champagne. "Liam is a sweet boy, but he has simple tastes. He's easily charmed by rustic things. But you must understand, Sarah, this family isn't just about love. It's about legacy. It's about breeding. And frankly, you just don't fit the mold." The words hung in the air like a slap. "Breed?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm a teacher, Eleanor. I have a master's degree. I love your son. What more do you want?" Eleanor stepped closer, her perfume cloying and expensive. "I want someone who belongs," she whispered. "Someone who knows which fork to use without thinking. Someone whose family name opens doors, not closes them. You're a nice girl, Sarah, but you're a tourist here. And tourists eventually go home." I stared at her, stunned. She wasn't just being rude. She was declaring war. She wanted me gone. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, lifting my chin. "Liam asked me to marry him. I said yes." Eleanor smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "We'll see how long that lasts. Marriages in our circle require stamina and resources. Do you really think you can keep up?" Just then, Liam returned with 2 glasses of champagne. "Here you go, love," he said, handing me one. He kissed my cheek, oblivious to the tension. "Mom, isn't she beautiful?" Eleanor beamed at him, her mask back in place. "Radiant, darling. Simply radiant. We were just discussing the wedding plans. Sarah has some interesting ideas." I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles burning my throat. Interesting ideas. That was code for cheap and tacky. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and vowed silently that I would show her exactly what kind of stamina I had. The months leading up to the wedding were a battlefield. Eleanor criticized everything. The venue, too pedestrian. The flowers, carnations? Seriously. The guest list, who are these people? She tried to hijack every decision, offering to pay for the upgrade if we did it her way. Liam, bless him, tried to mediate. "Mom just wants the best for us," he would say. "She's just excited." But I knew better. She was trying to price me out of my own wedding. She wanted me to feel small, inadequate, and dependent on her money. But I had a secret weapon. My grandfather, a quiet man who lived in a cabin in Montana, had passed away a few months before the engagement. I hadn't told anyone about the inheritance yet because probate was still clearing. Everyone assumed he was a poor hermit. But Grandpa had been an early investor in a little company called Apple, and he had never sold a single share. The probate cleared 2 weeks before the wedding. I received a call from the executor. The final valuation of the estate was substantial. 8 figures substantial. I sat in my small apartment staring at the check, my hands shaking. I was rich, wealthier than Eleanor, whose family money was tied up in trusts and illiquid assets. I didn't tell Liam yet. I wanted to surprise him. But more importantly, I wanted to set a trap for Eleanor. She had invited us to a pre-wedding brunch at her country club, a power move to show off her wealth to her friends and humiliate me one last time. I decided to accept. The brunch was as pretentious as I expected. Eleanor held court at a long table covered in white linen. Her friends, women with facelifts and diamonds, looked at me like I was a zoo exhibit. "So Sarah," one of them asked, "Eleanor tells us you're a teacher. How noble. Do you plan to keep working after the wedding? Or will you rely on Liam's allowance?" The table tittered. Eleanor smirked into her mimosa. "Oh, Sarah's very independent," she said. "She insists on paying for her own dress, even if it is vintage." "Actually," I said, setting down my fork, "I've been meaning to talk to you about the wedding budget, Eleanor." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Did you finally realize you can't afford the band you wanted? I told you I can write a check." "No," I said, smiling sweetly. "I realize that your contribution comes with too many strings. So, I've decided to decline your offer to pay for the reception." The table went silent. Eleanor looked confused. "Decline? But the deposit is due tomorrow. How will you pay for the catering? The venue?" "I already paid it," I said. "In full. And I upgraded the package. We're having lobster and filet mignon, not the chicken you suggested." Eleanor laughed nervously. "You paid? With what? Did you take out a loan?" "Oh, Sarah, starting a marriage in debt is so irresponsible." "No debt," I said. "Cash. Cash." Eleanor scoffed. "From a teacher's salary? Don't be ridiculous. Liam, did you give her money?" Liam looked just as confused as his mother. "No, Mom. I didn't." Eleanor turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. "Then where did it come from? Did you steal it?" The accusation hung in the air. "Eleanor!" Liam shouted. "That's enough. It's a valid question." Eleanor snapped. "She has no money. Her family has nothing. And suddenly she's paying for a $50,000 reception? It's suspicious." I reached into my purse and pulled out a bank statement I had printed that morning. I slid it across the table to Eleanor. "My grandfather passed away recently," I said calmly. "He left me a small inheritance." Eleanor picked up the paper, holding it like it was dirty. She glanced at the balance. Her eyes widened. Her face went pale. She looked at the number again, counting the zeros. This is. She stammered. "This is impossible." "It's very possible," I said. "Apple stock does well over 40 years. Her friends leaned in, trying to see the paper. Eleanor quickly folded it, hiding the number. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and fear. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant. She wasn't the rich matriarch patronizing the poor girl anymore. She was sitting across from a woman who could buy and sell her country club membership 10 times over. "Well," Eleanor said, her voice tight. "That's fortunate for you. But money doesn't buy class, Sarah." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But it does buy silence. And from now on, I expect you to be silent about my choices, my family, and my place in this world." The rest of the brunch was painfully quiet. Eleanor's friends, sensing the shift, suddenly became very interested in my teaching career. "It's so important to give back," one of them gushed. "You're a saint." I just smiled and ate my eggs Benedict. Eleanor picked at her food, defeated. Liam was stunned. In the car on the way home, he looked at me. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted it to be ours," I said. "Not something your mother could control. And honestly, I wanted to see her face." Liam laughed. "Her face was priceless. You really got her. The wedding was perfect. And it was my wedding. I wore a designer dress I bought with my own money, though I still wore my grandmother's pearl earrings. The flowers were orchids, not carnations. The band played our favorite songs, not the classical quartet Eleanor wanted. Eleanor was there, of course. She sat in the front row, stiff and silent. She smiled for the photos, but her eyes were wary. She knew now that I wasn't just Liam's wife. I was a force to be reckoned with. And when she tried to make a snide comment about the cake during the reception, I just looked at her and said, "It's delicious, isn't it? And fully paid for." She shut her mouth and ate her cake. We bought a house a few months later. Not with Liam's trust fund, but with a down payment from my inheritance. It was a beautiful historic home in a neighborhood Eleanor had always coveted but couldn't quite afford to buy into. When we invited her over for the housewarming, She walked through the rooms, touching the moldings, looking green with envy. "It's charming," she said, straining to find a criticism. "A bit large for 2 people, isn't it?" "We plan to fill it," I said, resting a hand on my stomach. "Eventually." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "A grandchild? Well, I suppose that changes things. You'll need a nanny. I know a wonderful agency." "We'll handle it, Eleanor," I said firmly. "We have it covered." Years went by. Eleanor softened, but only because she had to. She realized that if she wanted access to her son and future grandchildren, she had to play by my rules. The money didn't make me better than her, but it leveled the playing field. It took away her only weapon. One Christmas she gave me a gift. It was a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage brooch, one of the family heirlooms she had sworn I would never wear. "It belonged to my grandmother," she said stiffly. It suits you." I looked at her. It was a peace offering. A surrender. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said. "It's beautiful." I pinned the brooch to my dress. It sparkled in the light. I looked around the room at my husband, my beautiful home, and the life I had built. Eleanor had said I didn't belong. She had tried to push me out. But in the end, I didn't just belong. I owned the place. And as I sipped my wine, watching Eleanor play with our daughter on the rug, I realized something. She hadn't paid for her cruelty with money. She paid with her pride. And that was a price far higher than any check I could have written. I had won. Not by becoming like her, but by staying exactly who I was, just with a much better bank account. Our daughter, Sophie, was born in the spring. Eleanor arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after the birth, not with balloons, but with a list of approved pediatricians and a brochure for a Swiss boarding school. "It's never too early to apply," she said, looking down at the newborn in my arms. "The waiting lists are atrocious." "She's an hour old, Eleanor," I said, exhausted but firm. "I think we'll keep her in the country for at least a few years." Eleanor sniffed. "Well, don't keep her in that public school system you work for. We need to nurture her potential." I smiled, adjusting Sophie's blanket. "I'm taking a sabbatical to focus on her. And we've already hired a night nurse. One I interviewed, not the agency." Eleanor's lips pursued. She hated that I didn't need her connections. The first year of motherhood was a tug-of-war. Eleanor tried to undermine me at every turn. She would buy Sophie expensive, scratchy lace dresses that looked ridiculous. I would donate them and dress Sophie in soft, organic cotton. She would try to override my nap schedules. "Oh, let her stay up, Sarah. You're so rigid." One afternoon, I came home to find Eleanor in my living room with an interior designer. "I thought we'd redo the nursery," she announced. "That yellow is so common. We're thinking French gray." I walked over to the designer. "Please leave," I said politely. Then I turned to Eleanor. "If you change one paint chip in this house, I will change the locks. Do you understand?" Eleanor gasped. I was helping. "No," I said. "You were controlling. Go home." The power shift became undeniable when Liam's family business hit a rough patch. The economy had turned, and the luxury real estate market, the backbone of the Vanderbilt fortune, was stalling. Liam came home one night looking gray. "The board is freezing dividends," he said, loosening his tie. "Mom is panicking. Her liquidity is tied up in the properties." I was sitting at the kitchen island checking my portfolio. My grandfather's Apple stock had split again. My dividends were higher than Liam's salary. "Does she need help?" I asked. "She'd never ask," Liam said. "She'd starve first." "Good," I said, pouring him a glass of wine. "Let her figure it out. It builds character." Eleanor didn't starve, but she did start selling things. I noticed it at Sunday dinner. The breathless landscape painting that usually hung in the foyer was gone, replaced by a mirror. "Where's the Turner?" I asked casually. Eleanor stiffened. "Oh, it's being restored. The varnish was yellowing." A week later, I saw the painting in a catalog for an auction house. She was liquidating assets to maintain her lifestyle. It was tragic in a way. She was so desperate to keep up appearances that she was cannibalizing her own legacy. I could have stepped in then. I could have written a check. But I remembered the way she looked at my thrift store dress. I let the auction proceed. The crisis came to a head in the winter. The heating system in Eleanor's massive estate failed. It was an ancient boiler that required a $50,000 replacement. With her dividends frozen and her art sold, she didn't have the cash. She called Liam, weeping. "It's freezing in here. I'll catch pneumonia." Liam looked at me, torn. "I can't cover it, Sarah. My trust is locked too." I sighed, putting down my book. "Get your coat, Liam. We're going over there." "To pay for it?" he asked. "No," I said. "To negotiate." We arrived at the estate. Eleanor was wrapped in 3 fur coats, sitting by a small electric heater. She looked small and defeated. "Thank God you're here," she chattered. "Liam, write the check to the repairman." "Liam can't," I said, stepping forward. "But I can." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "You?" "Yes. My bank account is quite warm," I said. "But if I pay for this boiler, Eleanor, I want collateral." "Collateral?" she screeched. "I'm your mother-in-law. And this is a business transaction," I said. "I want the deed to the summer cottage in Martha's Vineyard." The cottage was her pride and joy. It was where she held court every July. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "That's family property." "And I'm family," I reminded her. "If I pay for the heat that keeps you alive, I want the summer house. Take it or leave it." She looked at the cold fireplace. She looked at her shivering reflection in the mirror. She realized she had no cards left to play. "Fine," she hissed. "Take it. You vulture." I smiled. "I prefer investor, Eleanor." I wrote the check on the spot. I didn't take the cottage to be mean. I took it because she couldn't afford the taxes on it anymore, and she would have lost it to the state within a year. I renovated it, winterized it, and invited her to stay there for a week in July. As a guest, she arrived with her suitcases, looking around at the new furniture I had chosen. "You changed the curtains," she muttered. "Yes," I said. "I like light. Do you want the guest room facing the ocean or the garden?" She swallowed hard. "The ocean, please." "Right this way," I said. She followed me, finally understanding that she was no longer the hostess. Sophie grew older, a bright and kind child. She loved painting just like me. One day, Eleanor was watching her draw. "She has talent," Eleanor admitted. "We should get her a tutor from the academy." "I'm teaching her," I said from the doorway. Eleanor looked up, ready to argue, then stopped. She remembered the boiler. She remembered the cottage. "Of course," she said quietly. "You're very capable, Sarah." It was the closest she had ever come to a compliment. The final blow to Eleanor's ego happened at the annual charity gala. For 30 years, Eleanor had been the chairwoman. It was her night to shine, to judge others, to be the queen. But this year, the board asked her to step down. They wanted fresh blood. They wanted someone with modern vision. They asked me. I didn't even apply. They just saw how I managed my assets, how I restored the cottage, and how I handled Eleanor. I accepted. The night of the gala, I walked in wearing a gold gown, custom-made, not vintage. Eleanor was there, wearing a dress she had worn 3 times before. She stood in the shadows while I gave the opening speech. "I want to thank my predecessor," I said into the microphone, looking directly at her. "Eleanor Vanderbilt, for setting a standard of tradition." The room applauded politely. Eleanor looked like she wanted to disappear. I walked off stage and went straight to her. "You look nice, Eleanor," I said. "You took my committee," she said, her voice shaking. "They gave it to me," I corrected, "because I doubled the donations in 1 month. People like backing a winner, Eleanor. And frankly, your style was a bit dated." She looked at the crowd, realizing they were all watching me, not her. "I used to be you," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "You were never me. You were born into this. I built this. There's a difference." Eleanor's health began to fail shortly after that. The stress of losing her status, combined with age, took its toll. She moved into the guest suite of our house, the big historic home I had bought. It was ironic. The woman who said I didn't belong in her family ended up living in my house, eating my food, sleeping under my roof. I hired the best nurses for her. I made sure she was comfortable, not because I loved her, but because I was better than her. One rainy afternoon, I was sitting by her bedside. She was frail now, her sharp edges dulled by illness. She looked at me with cloudy eyes. Sarah, she rasped. Yes, Eleanor? Why? She asked. Why do you take care of me? I was horrible to you. I put down my magazine. Because I made a vow to your son, I said. To love him and his family, even the difficult parts. And because I wanted you to see that I could. You won, she whispered. You took everything. The cottage. The gala. The house. I didn't take it, I said. I saved it. If it were up to you, the Vanderbilt legacy would have been auctioned off piece by piece to pay for heating bills. I kept it together. She closed her eyes. A single tear leaked out. Thank you, she said. It was barely audible, but I heard it. Eleanor passed away in her sleep a week later. The funeral was grand, just as she would have wanted. I paid for it all. The lilies, the mahogany casket, the choir. At the graveside, people came up to me. She was a force of nature, they said. Yes, I agreed. She certainly was. I stood next to Liam holding his hand. I felt a strange sense of peace. The war was over. We went through her things a month later. Her jewelry box was mostly empty. She had sold the good stuff years ago. But in the bottom drawer I found a letter. It was addressed to me. Sarah, it read. I underestimated you. I thought you were weak because you were kind. I was wrong. You are the strongest woman I know. Take care of my son. And please don't let Sophie wear lace. Really is scratchy. I laughed out loud. Even from the grave she had to have the last word. But it was a concession. I showed the letter to Liam. He smiled, tears in his eyes. She respected you, Sarah. In her own twisted way. I know, I said. She just didn't know how to show it without a price tag attached. I sat in the garden that afternoon, the garden of the house I owned, looking at the rose bushes I had planted. I thought about the girl in the thrift store dress who had stood in a similar garden, being told she didn't belong. I wished I could tell her what was coming. I wished I could tell her that the simple dress was just the beginning, that the tourist would end up owning the town. Sophie ran up to me holding a drawing. It was a picture of us, me, Liam, and her, standing in front of a giant castle. Who lives there? I asked. We do, she cheered. I pulled her into my lap. Yes, we do, I said. I looked up at the sky. Eleanor was gone, but her lesson remained. Never let anyone tell you who you are. And if they try, by the building they're standing in. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun, my son on my estate in my life. I had made her pay, yes. But in the process I had paid for my own freedom. And it was worth every penny.